Looking back now, it's hard to believe I was ever so naive. For 10 years, I thought my marriage to Sophia was stable and predictable. I was an engineer, always buried under deadlines and late-night projects, while she focused on climbing the corporate ladder as a Jameseater at a big company. From the outside, we looked like the perfect couple, the kind you'd see in cheesy commercials. But beneath that shiny surface, a dullness had started creeping into our lives. Things shifted one ordinary evening when Sophia ran into her old college friend, Ethan, at a cafe. I still remember the way she came home that night, practically glowing with excitement over the chance meeting. Her eyes sparkled as she told me about how they reminisced, sharing old stories. She even mentioned, casually, that Ethan had been her first love. I smiled, thinking it was sweet that she had this moment of nostalgia. I didn't realize that spark would ignite something much more dangerous. After that first meeting, I didn't think much about it. Maybe that was my first mistake. Sophia started spending more time with Ethan, assuring me they were just catching up. I can still picture one particular dinner when she couldn't stop talking about their coffee dates, laughing as she recalled silly things they used to do together. Her joy was infectious, but I felt this small, uncomfortable twinge. Shouldn't I be the one making her laugh like that? Then the changes began little by little. She started dressing differently, her wardrobe filling up with sleek, form-fitting dresses and elegant blouses I'd never seen her wear before. Even her perfume changed. The comforting scent I'd grown so familiar with was replaced by something sharper, more expensive, something I couldn't quite place. Each time I caught a whiff of it, it felt like a gut punch. At first I told myself not to overthink it. Maybe she just wanted to feel good about herself. But the uneasy feeling stayed. Then came the gym. First I thought it was a good thing. Who wouldn't want their partner to focus on their health? But her workout started stretching late into the evenings. And before long, she was gone more than she was home. When I asked her about it, she rolled her eyes and said she was just taking time for herself. I tried to believe her, but something felt off. It was the kind of suspicion that gnaws at you, quietly at first, until it's impossible to ignore. The real shift came with her phone. She started shielding it from me. Every time a message came in, she'd turn the screen away or leave the room to respond. Our once open and honest relationship had turned into something guarded and secretive. I couldn't stop wondering, what is she hiding? It all came to a head at a party at Daniel and Clara's place. I watched Sophia from across the room, laughing just a little too hard at one of Ethan's jokes. There was this sparkle in her eyes, mischievous, almost flirtatious, that I hadn't seen in years. Clara, always blunt, leaned over to me and asked, "Is everything okay between you two? Sophia seems really happy lately." I forced a smile, waved her off, and muttered something about everything being fine. But inside, I was unraveling. Could Sophia really be cheating? The thought made me feel sick. That night, lying in bed next to her, I couldn't sleep. Every peaceful breath she took felt like a reminder of how far apart we'd grown. I finally decided to bring it up cautiously at first. "Don't you think you've been a little distant lately?" I asked one evening. She shrugged and laughed it off. "You're imagining things," she said. "Everything's great." But her tone, the flicker of irritation in her eyes, it didn't feel great. When I couldn't hold it in any longer, I asked her outright if there was someone else. She laughed, louder this time, like the idea was absurd. "That's ridiculous," she said and quickly changed the subject. But her reaction didn't put me at ease. If anything, it only made me more certain that something was very, very wrong. Felt like a slap in the face. Feeling helpless, I turned to Daniel for support. We'd been friends for years, and he could see the turmoil I was going through. I laid out my concerns, hoping he'd reassure me, but instead, he listened quietly and then suggested I consider hiring a private detective. At first, I was hesitant. Did I really want to dig into my wife's life like that? But as the days went on, the uncertainty gnawed at me, and finally, I made the call. It was a no-nonsense guy who took my suspicions seriously. I remember explaining everything to him, feeling a mix of hope and dread. He promised to gather evidence using surveillance techniques I'd only seen in movies. I had no idea how much my life would change in the coming weeks. The waiting was agonizing. Every time Sophia came home late or didn't answer her phone, the tension in me grew. It was like a ticking time bomb. I spent so many sleepless nights, lost in my thoughts, imagining the worst. Could she really betray me? I wanted to believe she wouldn't. But each passing day made the fear of the unknown grow stronger. The more I tried to brush it off, the more glaring Sophia's changes became. First, I thought I was being paranoid. After all, what husband doesn't want his wife to feel confident? But her wardrobe shifted dramatically. Gone were the comfortable, laid-back outfits I was used to seeing her in. They were replaced by form-fitting dresses that hugged her figure, elegant blouses that shimmered under the light, and high heels that made her legs look amazing. I'd catch glimpses of her in the mirror, and a part of me swelled with pride. She looked stunning, but another part of me felt a growing unease. Who was she dressing for? Even her perfume changed. Sophia had always worn a subtle scent that felt like home, but now it was something new, richer, more expensive. I never thought I'd be the kind of guy to feel jealous over a perfume. But here I was wondering who she was trying to impress. When I asked her about it, she'd just smile and say it was a little treat for herself. But her casual responses only deepened my suspicions. Then came the gym. First I welcomed it. Good for her, I thought. Maybe she was just taking charge of her health. But what started as a positive change quickly spiraled. Suddenly Sophia was working out nearly every day. At first, she'd come home not long after I got back from work. But soon, she began coming home much later, often after I'd already settled in for the night. When I asked her about it, she'd shrug and insist it was all part of her plan to get fit and have some personal time. It was hard to argue with that, but I couldn't ignore how much her confidence had shifted. It was almost like she was walking through life with a newfound swagger. I found myself watching her closely, too closely. Every time her phone buzzed, she'd whip it away, silencing it before I could see anything. If she did respond, it was always in another room away from me. The woman who'd once been so open about everything now seemed to be playing a secretive game, and I wasn't allowed in. It was frustrating. I started to feel like a stranger in my own home. Then there was the party at Daniel and Clara's house. I thought it might be a chance to distract myself, to get away from all the tension. But when I saw Sophia laughing a little too freely with Ethan, that knot in my stomach came back. Clara, always straightforward, cornered me in the kitchen. "James, are you okay? Sophia seems really happy lately, more than usual. Are you sure everything is fine?" Her question hit me like a brick. I forced a smile and said, "Yeah, everything's fine." But inside, I was crumbling. It felt like I was standing on the edge of a cliff, and one wrong move would send me over the edge. That night, as I lay in bed next to Sophia, her steady breathing contrasted sharply with the storm in my mind. Every time I closed my eyes, I pictured her with Ethan, laughing and smiling. Was it just harmless fun, or was there something more? I didn't sleep a wink that night, my thoughts spiraling into darker places. In the days that followed, I tried to confront her. "I've noticed some changes in you lately. Is everything okay?" I asked, trying to keep my voice steady despite the tremor of uncertainty. Each time, she'd brush it off with a wave of her hand, laughing like I was being ridiculous. "You're exaggerating," she'd say, always with that same casual tone. But no matter how much she dismissed my concerns, the nagging feeling in my chest wouldn't go away. "James, everything's wonderful. Just trust me," she'd say, that infuriating smile plastered across her face, like I was a child throwing a tantrum over nothing. It drove me insane. Then one night, I couldn't hold it in any longer. The words tumbled out of my mouth before I could stop them. "Are you seeing someone else?" I blurted, the question feeling like it had been wrenched out of my throat against my will. For a split second, she froze, her smile faltering. Then she burst into laughter. "That's absurd, James," she replied, her voice dripping with condescension. She rolled her eyes and turned away, leaving me standing there, staring at her back, completely crushed. My chest tightened, the weight of helplessness pressing down on me as the reality of her deception loomed larger and larger. I knew then that I couldn't face this alone. I needed help. I turned to Daniel, the one person I could count on, the friend who had been by my side through thick and thin. I laid out my fears, the gnawing doubts that were eating me alive. He listened, nodding thoughtfully before suggesting something that hit me like a bolt of lightning. James, maybe you should hire a private detective. If you're feeling this way, it might be worth finding out the truth. At first, I felt a wave of shame crash over me, stalking my own wife. Was that really what it had come to? But as the days dragged on, each sleepless night filled with unanswered questions and growing doubt, his suggestion began to take root in my mind. The weight of uncertainty became unbearable. I needed answers no matter how painful they might be. So after days of tormenting myself, I finally made the call. The decision felt like a heavy burden, but deep down, I knew it was the only way forward. I met with Victor, the private detective, in a cramped office cluttered with papers and surveillance equipment. The walls were lined with photos of people caught in compromising situations, a grim reminder of why I was there. Sitting across from him, a stranger who was about to dig into my wife's secrets felt surreal. "Tell me everything," Victor said, his voice calm but commanding, as though he had seen heartbreak and betrayal countless times before. So I told him. I laid out all my suspicions. The sudden changes in Sophia's wardrobe, her obsessive gym visits, the late nights, the secrecy with her phone. Each word felt like a dagger, cutting deeper into my chest as I relived every painful moment that had brought me to this point. "I'll get to the bottom of this," he assured me, his tone unwavering. "I have the tools to gather the evidence you need. You'll know the truth soon enough." His confidence sparked a flicker of hope in me, but it was quickly overshadowed by fear of what he might uncover. Over the next few weeks, Victor became my lifeline. He followed Sophia, documenting her every move, every suspicious activity. Then came the day he called me with his first findings. "James, I have some footage I think you need to see," he said, his voice steady but serious. My heart raced as I drove to his office, dread pooling in my stomach. I sat across from him, bracing myself for what felt like the beginning of the end. He started with photographs. The first one showed Sophia laughing across a table from Ethan at a cafe. They looked so at ease, so comfortable together. Their chemistry was undeniable, even through the lens of a camera. My fists clenched involuntarily. This wasn't just a friendly reunion. It was something much more intimate. Then came the videos. Each clip showed them together at different locations, their interactions sending a fresh wave of nausea through me. Finally, Victor pulled up screenshots of text messages. "These are conversations you need to see," he said gravely. My breath caught in my throat as I read through the messages. At first they seemed harmless, casual banter, shared memories. But as I scrolled further, the tone shifted. Flirty comments, playful teasing, and plans to meet up, all laced with a sense of urgency that made my skin crawl. My world narrowed to just me, Victor, and the evidence laid bare before us. "This isn't just a friendship, James," he said, his words cutting through the silence. "This is something much deeper." I sat there, staring at the photos and messages, grappling with a storm of emotions. Anger, heartbreak, disbelief. I had spent so long convincing myself that Sophia wouldn't betray me, but now the truth was glaring back at me like a neon sign. And then a darker thought crept into my mind. I didn't just want to confront her. I wanted to leave a James on her, a wound as deep and lasting as the one she'd inflicted on me. I felt the seed of revenge plant itself in my heart, growing stronger with every passing second. "I want to gather more evidence," I told Victor, my voice steady even though I was barely holding it together inside. "I want everything. I need to know every single detail of what she's been doing." He nodded, his expression calm. He'd seen this transformation before, the shift of a betrayed husband into someone driven by sheer determination and, yes, vengeance. As days turned into weeks, I became consumed by the growing pile of evidence. Trips to hotels, dinners at upscale restaurants, and those intimate moments that seemed to drive a wedge deeper into our marriage. Every photograph, every report added fuel to the fire inside me. It ignited a rage I struggled to keep contained. One evening, after a grueling day at work, I came home to find Sophia curled up on the couch, her attention glued to her phone. She looked up and smiled at me. That smile, the one that used to feel warm but now cut like a dagger. "Hey, how was your day?" she asked, her tone casual, as if everything was perfectly normal. "Just the usual," I replied, forcing my voice to stay even while a storm raged inside me. "How about you?" "Oh, just busy with work," she said with a casual wave, dismissing the question as if it was unimportant. I wanted to scream, to rip down the walls of this facade she'd built. But I didn't. Instead, I simply nodded, swallowing the fury that burned in my chest. The irony hit me hard. Here we were, two people sharing a home, yet both living in completely separate realities. The truth, dark, raw, and undeniable, lurked in the shadows between us, waiting to surface. As the investigation continued, my focus shifted. I began to piece together a plan, carefully anticipating my next moves like a chess player mapping out their strategy. I didn't just want to confront her. I wanted her to feel the weight of her betrayal, to understand the destruction she had caused. The thought of her walking into the house, only to find the evidence laid out before her. The photographs, the messages, everything sent a dark thrill coursing through me. But as I plotted my revenge, memories of the life we once shared crept in. I couldn't stop thinking about the good times. The laughter, the late-night conversations, the dreams we once had together. The love I'd felt for her wasn't gone. It was buried, twisted beneath the anger and pain. It made everything hurt more. How could this woman, the one who had meant everything to me, now feel like a stranger? The ache in my chest was unbearable. But with every new piece of evidence, my resolve hardened. I wasn't just a hurt husband anymore. I was a man on a mission, driven to make her feel the pain she had inflicted on me. The storm inside me grew stronger, and I knew it was time to take action. The desire for revenge wasn't just a passing thought. It pulsed through me, making me feel alive in a way I hadn't in years. One evening, I went to a bar a little off the beaten path, hoping to find someone who could help me in my scheme. The place was quiet, filled with the murmur of strangers and the soft clinking of glasses. That's where I met Natalia. She was sitting alone, her dark hair cascading over her shoulders, something refreshing and grounded about her presence. We struck up a conversation, and it didn't take long for me to realize she was exactly what I needed. Natalia was open and sincere, sharing stories about her own struggles and the heartaches she'd faced. She had just come out of a rough relationship and was searching for herself again. Much like I was, the connection between us felt natural, even comforting. I wasn't looking for love. I was looking for an accomplice, and Natalia fit the role perfectly. After a few casual meetups, I invited her to my home. It was risky, I knew that, but the thrill of it all was intoxicating. That night we talked and laughed for hours. The tension between us crackled like static, and for the first time in a long while I felt liberated. Natalia listened without judgment, her presence a salve to my bruised ego. But in the back of my mind, I knew this was all part of my plan. Just as things started to heat up between us, I heard the front door open. Sophia was home earlier than I'd expected. My heart raced as adrenaline surged through me. For a split second, I hesitated, questioning everything. But then I reminded myself why I was doing this, why she deserved this. I needed her to feel the shock, the betrayal, the devastation I had felt. The bedroom door was slightly ajar, and I could hear her footsteps approaching. The sound sent a jolt of energy through me. When she pushed the door open, her face froze in shock, her expression a mix of disbelief and horror. I was sprawled across the bed with Natalia, who looked just as shocked to see Sophia as I had imagined she would. But inside I felt triumphant. "James, what the hell?" Sophia's voice trembled, her face a storm of shock and anger. For a moment, she stood frozen in the doorway, her expression shifting from disbelief to fury. I didn't respond. I just met her gaze, savoring the devastation on her face. This was the first blow, the painful taste of her own medicine, and I reveled in it. The hurt in her eyes was unmistakable, and for the first time in what felt like forever, I felt satisfaction, a dark, vindictive satisfaction. She opened her mouth to speak, but no words came out. I could almost see the storm of thoughts racing through her mind as she turned to leave. I called after her, my voice cutting through the tension like a knife. "How does it feel, Sophia, to walk in on something you didn't expect?" The irony dripped from my words, but I wasn't done. This was only the beginning. That night, I took my plan a step further. Using the evidence Victor had collected, photographs, videos, screenshots of her conversations with Ethan, I put together a detailed package. Then I sent it anonymously to her colleagues at work, including her boss. The fallout was swift and brutal. Within days, Sophia was called into a meeting with management. I watched from a distance, lurking in the shadows as the scandal erupted. My heart raced, torn between fear and exhilaration. I knew I was crossing a line, but it felt justifiable. This was the revenge I'd craved. She had taken so much from me, and now it was her turn to face the consequences. Later that week, Daniel called me, his voice frantic. "James, have you heard what's happening with Sophia? There's a huge scandal at her company. She's being questioned about her behavior." I couldn't help but chuckle, the satisfaction swelling within me. "Yeah, I heard," I replied casually, playing it cool. It's a shame she got caught up in something like that. The taste of her downfall was bittersweet. Even as I tried to mask it, I felt a rush of dark glee knowing she was finally facing the music for her choices. Sophia's world began to unravel. Her friends, including Elena, initially tried to support her, but as the revelation spread, they started feeling the pressure from their own colleagues. Sophia's reputation crumbled, leaving her isolated, stripped of the social safety net she had carefully built over the years. It was a brutal awakening. The look on her face when she realized the full extent of the damage was something I'll never forget. She had built her life on lies, and now it was collapsing around her. I wasn't just inflicting pain. I was forcing her to confront the reality of her actions, to feel the full weight of her betrayal. But even as I reveled in this newfound power, doubts crept in during the quiet of the night. Was this the right thing to do? Was I becoming the very monster I despised? I shook the thoughts away, convincing myself this was justice. I was balancing the scales, and revenge was my only comfort now. I wouldn't stop until she understood the true cost of her betrayal. After everything that had transpired, the divorce felt inevitable. The air between us was thick with tension and resentment as we moved into the legal proceedings. It was the final chapter of a marriage that had once been full of love and promise, but had now become a battlefield. I remember sitting in that cold, sterile courtroom, my palms sweating as I waited for the proceedings to begin. The gavel's sharp echo rang in my ears, a harsh reminder of the reality we were facing. Her expression shifting between defiance and despair. She looked tired, her once vibrant eyes dulled by the weight of everything she had brought upon herself. During the hearings, she clung to any thread of justification she could muster. James had an affair with another woman, she argued, her voice tinged with false indignation, as if that one statement could absolve her of the years of deceit. It was almost laughable how she believed it might sway the court. But the evidence Victor had gathered was damning. The photographs, the messages, the video footage. It painted a clear, undeniable picture of her infidelity and betrayal. As the evidence was laid out, Sophia's attempts to shift blame crumbled under the weight of the truth. Watching her squirm under the judge's scrutiny, exposed and vulnerable, I felt a wave of vindication wash over me. All her efforts to justify herself fell apart, leaving her with nothing but the reality of her actions. Her world had unraveled, and as much as I wanted to say I felt closure, a part of me knew the scars of her betrayal would linger. Daniel and Clara sat beside me for support, their presence a comforting anchor in the chaos. They whispered quiet words of encouragement, reminding me I wasn't alone. True friends standing by me during such a tumultuous time was a small comfort, but it made enduring the emotionally charged proceedings just a bit easier. Every exchange in that courtroom was laced with bitterness and resentment, accusations and memories trading blows like weapons. I couldn't ignore the pain in Sophia's eyes. It was there, plain as day, but alongside it came a sense of release. The truth was finally out, and she could no longer hide behind her lies. It was a painful process, one that dredged up memories of happier times. But I reminded myself why I was here. This wasn't about clinging to the past. It was about reclaiming my life and moving forward. "James, you've changed," Sophia said to me one day, her voice sharp with anger as she tried to twist the blame back onto me. "You're not the man I married." It was a low blow, and for a moment her words stung. But then clarity washed over me. "No, I'm not," I replied, my voice calm and steady. "I'm someone who's finally standing up for himself." The court hearings dragged on, each session like a slow-moving storm, but I could feel the walls closing in on Sophia. She had lost her grip on the narrative, and the truth was catching up to her. I was no longer the hurt, betrayed husband. I was a man fighting for my dignity and a fresh start. Eventually, the court ruled in my favor. When the judge's decision was announced, it felt like a weight had been lifted off my shoulders, a final seal on a toxic chapter of my life. Sophia lost not only her marriage, but also her reputation and the respect of those around her. As the gavel fell, I felt an odd mixture of relief and sadness. The love we'd once shared had been replaced by bitterness, and I knew there was no going back. As I walked out of the courtroom, a rush of emotions hit me, and the faintest glimmer of hope. I had endured the worst, and now it was time to look ahead. The world was wide open, and I was free to reclaim my life, to redefine who I was. Sophia's betrayal had pushed me to my breaking point, but it had also ignited a fire in me, a drive to rise above the chaos and become something greater. In the days that followed, as the dust settled, I reflected on everything that had happened. I had lost a part of myself in the battle, but I was determined to emerge stronger. With Daniel and Clara's support and the hard lessons I'd learned, I knew I could start fresh. The scars would always remain, but they became reminders of how far I'd come and the strength I'd discovered within myself. After the divorce, I stood at a crossroads, staring down a new chapter that was both daunting and exhilarating. The weight of Sophia's betrayal had lifted, leaving behind a profound sense of liberation. I had emerged from the ashes, ready to rebuild. Deepening my connection with Natalia was the first step. Seeing her felt like a breath of fresh air. She didn't just understand the pain I'd been through. She offered the compassion and connection I'd been craving for so long. Our relationship blossomed into something meaningful, and I found solace in her presence. With every shared conversation and laugh, I began to rediscover parts of myself I thought I'd lost. We talked for hours about our dreams, our mistakes, and everything in between. For the first time in years, I felt truly understood. Alongside this newfound relationship, I made the gym my sanctuary. It became my ritual, a place to channel my frustrations, reclaim my body, and rebuild my confidence. Each drop of sweat felt like a release, shedding the remnants of my old life and stepping into a stronger version of myself. The transformation wasn't just physical. It was a powerful reminder of my resilience. I started setting new fitness goals and taking pride in the progress I made. With my personal growth, my career also became a priority. I realized how much I had neglected my professional ambitions during my marriage, letting them take a back seat to the turmoil at home. Now I poured my energy into my work, taking on challenging projects and finding a renewed sense of purpose. Each success fueled my determination to keep moving forward. Inspired by this momentum, I began planning a trip abroad, a journey to free myself from the haunting memories of the past. I needed to step outside my comfort zone to explore new cultures and experiences. The thought of immersing myself in the unfamiliar filled me with excitement. It was a chance to reset, to rediscover who I was without the shadows of my old life looming over me. I also started therapy, something I had resisted for a long time. But as I sat across from a compassionate therapist and began to share my story, I felt the weight on my shoulders lighten. Session by session, I unpacked the emotional baggage I had been carrying. I learned to embrace my feelings, to understand that vulnerability wasn't weakness. Therapy gave me clarity about my needs and desires, helping me grow beyond the confines of my past. In time, I realized this painful experience had shaped me into someone stronger. I set new goals, not just for my career, but for my personal life. I wanted relationships built on trust and respect, and I sought out people who uplifted me instead of dragging me down. Sophia became a distant memory, a shadow from the past that had lost its power over me. I was moving forward, leaving behind the bitterness that had once consumed me. I felt something I hadn't in a long time: hope. Life wasn't just a series of betrayals and disappointments anymore. It was a blank canvas, waiting for me to paint it with new experiences and opportunities. Every day felt like a fresh start. I found joy in the little things: morning runs, spontaneous outings with Natalia, and the excitement of planning my travels. I was rediscovering myself, learning to live without the fear that had once held me back. My journey was far from over, but with each step, I felt more confident and empowered. In the end, I realized the scars from my past weren't just Jameis of pain. They were symbols of my strength and resilience. I had faced betrayal head-on and come out the other side, ready to build a future filled with hope, love, and endless possibilities. Sophia was no longer my focus. I was carving out a new identity, one rooted in optimism and self-discovery.